So tonight is using your four-wheel drive overview and driving in winter weather. So I want to thank you for being here with me tonight and a little bit later this evening. So we're going to jump in and get started. So with the winter weather coming, I know a lot of ladies have asked about using four-wheel drive. We've had a couple different comments and posts in our private Facebook group. And then I've actually gotten a couple private messages, which I enjoy that, ladies. So if you ever have any questions, especially about something specific, go ahead and post it up on the group. Or, if you're not really comfortable sharing yet, that is okay. And go ahead and you can always shoot me a private message off of the LadyJeepers Facebook group. And we are more than happy to jump in and help you with any questions that you have. So, that's why I kind of did this impromptu class tonight, because once we have a couple questions, I know if one or two people ask, there's probably a lot more of you ladies that are thinking it, but maybe haven't put it out there to me yet. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to start with the very basics to begin with tonight. So we are really starting at, if you just got your Jeep and you're going to start using your four-wheel drive, we are starting at the very beginning for tonight's training. So right now we're going to go into putting your Jeep into and taking it out of four-wheel drive. And again, we are just starting at the very basics for tonight for everybody. Hey ladies, so today we're talking about using four-wheel drive. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. So we are in my 2017 JKU. As you can see, this is an automatic. My YJ is a manual. This JKU is an automatic. So we're going to go over using four-wheel drive. So if you look at my dash, ignore my little button, my little light right here that's telling me I need air in the one tire. I have to reset my sensor, so we'll ignore that. But as you can see, the only thing that I have on is seatbelt light. I always have my emergency brake on, so that light is on. We're going to talk about using four-wheel drive. So right now, I'm in park. I'm in two-wheel high. But as you can see, two-wheel high is at the very top. Drop down to four-wheel high. Then you have neutral. It's going to be over and down, and then your four-wheel low all the way over and down. So when you're not in four-wheel drive, it should be all the way up into high, which it is right now. So as you can see, it is all the way at the front, which means I'm in two-wheel drive. So depending on what year your Jeep is, it's going to look a little bit different, but it's all still basically the same. What we're going to do is we're going to start by putting the Jeep in two-wheel high. So, everyone has a little different opinion on this. You can, as you are moving, I prefer to try, unless I absolutely have to do everything from a stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be stopped, and I'm going to put my Jeep in neutral. So I put my foot on the brake. I drop it down to neutral. And if you have a manual, you'll just find your neutral center. So now that I'm in neutral, my foot's on the brake, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my four-wheel drive shifter, and it's already in the forward position, so I'm going to drop it down one click. So it's going to feel like you drop down one, and now I'm in four-wheel high. So what do you notice when you go into four-wheel drive? So four-wheel high, I'm in neutral, my foot is on the brake, I drop down to four-wheel high, so now I have a light. And so my light on the dash now says four-wheel drive. So then if I wanted to, I could put it in drive, and I could go ahead and drive off. But so now we're going to go ahead and drop it into four-wheel low. So anytime you drop into four-wheel low, you need to be stopped. So you have to be at a complete stop. Put your vehicle in neutral, and now, because I want to go to four-wheel low, I'm going to go ahead, and four-wheel low is all the way over and at the bottom. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see. So I'm going to go over and all the way down. So now my shifter is all the way down into four-wheel low. And as you can see, the four-wheel drive light came on. Now that I'm in low, I can go ahead and put my Jeep in drive, and I could go ahead and drive in four-wheel low. So now I want to go ahead and take my vehicle out of four-wheel drive. So I'm going to put it back in neutral. And again, if you have a manual, you'll find your neutral in the center. And now I'm going to take my shifter and I'm going to go back up to four-wheel high. So I'm going to go over and up. So now I'm in neutral. And now I'm in four high. And if I look up on the dash, the four-wheel drive button is still on. So now I'm going to go ahead and shift into two-wheel high. So I am in neutral. And again, I do everything from a stop. You can shift as you're rolling. That is completely up to you. I just like to do everything from a stop. So now I'm going to go up. Now I'm all the way back up with my shifter in two-wheel drive. And if I look up on the dash, the light is gone. So I'm back in two-wheel drive. So if I put it back in drive, I can go ahead and just drive off, back in two-wheel drive. So I hope that helps some with understanding how to put your Jeep in and out of four-wheel drive.
Oh, it took me all the way back. So that is just, like I said, we kind of started with the absolute basics tonight. So, you know, if you're not comfortable, you haven't used four-wheel drive a lot in your Jeep yet, the biggest thing is to take the time to practice. So just like what I kind of did, I wasn't out on a trail. I wasn't getting ready to ride, but take the time to just practice. So getting your Jeep, you know, make sure you have some room behind you and in front of you. And you can even do this in your driveway and just practice putting your Jeep in and out of four-wheel drive. Now, something I want to mention is sometimes when you've been in park and you put it right down into neutral, sometimes the shifter for the four-wheel drive can be hard. So if you go to shift and you're fighting and it doesn't want to move and you feel like you're kind of having to like rip the shifter and nothing's happening, take your foot off of the brake while you're in neutral and let your Jeep roll just a little bit. Then put your foot back on the brake and then try to shift it. You know, in some of the older Jeeps, it can be a little bit harder to shift it into four-wheel drive. So something I have found that you can play with a little bit is go to drive and then go to neutral and then try and then take your foot off the brake, put your foot back on the brake, and kind of just play around with it a little bit until the shifter gets a little bit easier to pull it down into four-wheel drive. Because if you're having to really torque on it and you're pulling and it's not moving, you know, it's much easier to try to just take the leverage off and to move, you know, drive, stop, neutral, take your foot off the brake, put your foot back on the brake, alleviate some of that stress, and then try again. Then trying to just jerk and jam and pull the shifter out of two-wheel drive into four-wheel drive. So that's always something to really think about when you go to shift. And something I have found too is if you're trying to drop all the way down into four low, sometimes if you'll just drop down to four high and then go ahead and put it in drive, let it roll, then stop, put it in neutral, you know, take your foot off the brake, take that pressure off, back on the brake, and then shift it all the way down into low. Sometimes that'll help because low, you know, that's the lowest gear in your gearbox. So it's sometimes can be a little stickier and harder to get that case to transfer. So just think about really trying to just play with it a little bit, especially in the older Jeeps, and kind of find their sweet spot. So it's easier to go ahead and pull it down. So something to really think about is kind of playing with that, how much pressure is loaded and what kind of incline you are on in your Jeep when you're going to transfer from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive. And then same thing from four-wheel drive back to two-wheel drive. And if you find you get stuck again trying to get it from four-wheel low all the way back up to two-wheel drive. Take your time, kind of like I showed you in these steps, and move from one to the next. And as you move from four-wheel low to high, go ahead and drive and then stop and then move it into two-wheel drive. So sometimes it's just trying to find, I call it the sweet spot when you're trying to move the shifter and engage and disengage the four-wheel drive. So hopefully that helps. I know it was really basic, but it takes time to practice and get comfortable and feel. Sometimes in the older Jeeps, especially, it's hard to feel exactly when they're going into four high and when you're getting to neutral. And so the more you can kind of play with your four-wheel drive and engaging and disengaging and going from four high to low to four high to two-wheel drive, finding neutral, the more time you put in and just practice and play with that, then the easier it's going to be and the better your feel is going to be of knowing exactly where you are trying to find which four-wheel drive. I know in some of my older Jeeps, there's no markings left anymore. Everything's been worn off the shifters. So, that's why it's good to play with things so that you have a good feel and take that time, to get the feel for the shifters and positions and comfortable when you need it. Because, once you get out on the trail or on a ride, if you hit a spot where you're like, oh my gosh, I need to drop it into four-wheel drive or four-wheel low, and you're going to get a little flustered. I know I do. Anytime you're in, I call them a high stress situation, which means you kind of have to perform or you need it now. So, your adrenaline goes a little bit more. So the more you can play with it and get comfortable when it's not in that situation, then the more comfortable you're going to be. If you are out on a big ride or you hit an obstacle and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I need to drop down into four low, you're more comfortable doing so when there's more pressure put on you. So then the next thing I want to talk about is in winter weather, such as snow, when do you use four-wheel high and four-wheel low? So this really goes along with trail riding as well. If you're out on rocky terrain or if you're out in the mud, but for the snow is a little different because you're going to be driving on a road. So what I want you to think about, the general rule is know the road conditions. So know, how much snow, ice, what degree are the roads at. I know for us, we have a lot of trees. So sometimes we'll have a higher accumulation of snow and then we have bare spots or we have icy spots. And sometimes the roads are a lot worse than others. Sometimes they're not too bad. So know ahead of time, if you can, what the road conditions are going to be before you go out to drive, because that is going to determine, what speed you're going, if you're going to need four-wheel drive, and then if it's going to warrant to be more careful, if the roads are a little more treacherous. So the more prepared you can be and you can know about the conditions before you go out there, the better it's going to be for you. So four-wheel high is really for your higher speeds. That's why it's high. It's a higher gears for the higher speeds. I've heard a lot of people say the max speed is 65. The recommended max speed in four-wheel high is 60. But I'll be honest that I don't want to go over 45 when I am in four-wheel drive, just because I am overly cautious. And I also feel like whether I'm on a trail, in the mud, or out on snow, if I have to have four-wheel drive on, there really should be no reason that I'm driving more than 45 miles an hour if the road really warrants or the trail that I'm in four-wheel high. So I feel like that is a very generous speed. So then for four-wheel low, so low is for the slower speeds and harder terrain or road conditions. So this is going to be when you're going a lower mile per hour. So personally, I wouldn't go over 15 miles per hour in low. I know they say you can go up to 15 or 20, but you want to be really careful with that low gear. So personally, I would say, again, erring on the side of caution. If you're going to be in four-wheel low, you should be going 10 miles per hour or lower, because this is your slow gear. And this is what you want to use when you're on bad road conditions, where you're going to be driving slower. So, for example, if you're kind of cruising down the road in some snow and you come to a hill that has snow or ice on it, or it might just be it's the same amount of snow you've been on, but you have a bigger incline, you want to stop before you get to that hill and put it in four-wheel low. I know, and I don't want to talk bad about the guys, but I know sometimes, there's that idea of, well, let's just see if we can make it. And then if we need it, we're going to drop it into four low. When we're talking about driving in winter weather, we're talking about being out on public roads where there's other drivers, where we're having to compensate not only for ourselves in more treacherous conditions, but also others who maybe are not as equipped to be out there either. So before you come to a hill, go ahead and stop, put it in four-wheel low, and then just think 10 or 15 miles per hour up the hill, consistent speed, and keep it in four-wheel low. That way, if something were to happen and you were to lose traction as you were going up the hill at a higher speed, you're not having to stop in the middle of a hill to put it in four-wheel low and then try to continue. So really, the biggest key when we're talking about four-wheel drive and driving in the snow and in less than ideal terrain and road conditions is being cautious and careful and thinking ahead so that you're setting yourself up to really have the least amount of issues as possible. Our Jeeps are amazing. They're wonderful. I love them. Sometimes we feel pretty invincible and unstoppable in them, but they are a vehicle and it still is snow and winter weather, especially when we start talking about ice. The more consistent your speed can be, staying in four-wheel low at a lower mile per hour, the safer you're going to be. Even a Jeep can lose traction. Even the Jeep can end up off-road, off of the main traveled road. So just keep in mind, really thinking ahead and preparing so that before you get to a hill or if you come across around a corner and the road conditions are worse, before you get to those road conditions, try to go ahead and prepare yourself so that you're not having to stop and restart, especially when it comes to up and down hills. That's something we see a lot around here. So just think ahead. And then you can always pull over to put your Jeep in and out of four-wheel drive. Safety comes first. This is something I know I've heard some people mention of, well, I don't want to have to pull over and be in the way or pull over and stop. But if you need to stop off the road safely and put your Jeep in and out of four-wheel low, or if you actually have to get out and lock and unlock the hubs, don't be embarrassed or worry about doing it. It's winter weather and your safety and your ability to safely make it where you're going comes first. So always err on the side of caution. If you think it might get bad, pull over, go ahead and make sure you're in low, you're going slower. And if you have to, get out and lock your hubs before you get into a situation where you're going to need your hubs locked. And then 5, always prepare and plan ahead. Like I just said, just because we have a Jeep doesn't mean that we'll never get stuck. Always plan ahead and have recovery equipment in your vehicle for winter weather to help you get yourself out. That's really important. If you live in an area where there's snow, always make sure you have everything with you in your Jeep so that if something were to happen, you're prepared. So always have a jacket and extra jackets and a blanket in your Jeep just in case you were to get stuck. And try to always keep gas in your Jeep so you don't run out if you do get stuck and then you're going to run out of heat. So if you're going to have to drive home from work in the snow, there's a chance of snow, make sure you fill up your tank, make sure you have gas when you get to work so that your entire drive home you have gas and you're not going to run out. And then also take precautions to ensure your safety in a worst case scenario in winter weather. So always make sure that you have gloves, you have winter clothes, you have gloves. Always either wear a pair of boots or keep a pair of boots in your Jeep, a shovel, anything that you're going to need if worst case scenario, you did end up sliding off the road or you ended up stuck somewhere. That way, you know that you're prepared. That's a big thing, is to always be prepared. And now we're going to talk about traction control. And I'm bringing this up just because depending on what vehicle you have and what year, the traction control is directly linked to your four-wheel low. These newer Jeeps, they do all the thinking for us now. I want to talk about traction control a little bit, especially as we're talking about winter weather, so that you can understand the traction control. Or in some of the older Jeeps, it's an ESP button, which is the exact same thing as traction control. But we'll go ahead and share this video next.
Now, depending on what model you have of your Jeep and what year it is, as you can see, another light just came on. And it shows, I call it like little squiggly lines and off. So what that means is I went ahead and dropped my Jeep down into four-wheel low, and I have a Rubicon. So, it already went ahead and took my traction control off, is what that means. And if you look over here, there's a button that matches. That is traction control, so you can turn it off manually as well. So anytime you're going to take your Jeep off-roading, you want to make sure that this is off. So you have turned your traction control off. In the older Jeeps, it's going to look a little bit different, but it's going to be the same thing for traction control. And then as you can see, the light on the dash matches that as well. So it looks like the traction control is off. So, and now I'm in 4 high. And if I look up on the dash, the four-wheel drive button is still on, but you've noticed my traction control off is actually turned back on because I'm no longer in low. So these newer Jeeps do a lot of the thinking for you, depending on what model you have. But you still have this button here. So you can hit the button and manually turn your traction control off. And then I'm going to turn it back on. So anytime you're driving down the road, you want your traction control on. So no light means it's on. And anytime you're off-road, you want to make sure your traction control is off.
All right, so there's a lot of different opinions on this subject about, do you drive in the snow with your traction control on or off? There are so many different opinions, so many different thought processes on this. So this is the consensus that I wanted to share with you ladies. If you are running at a higher speed in four-wheel high, if you're on decent terrain road and conditions, you want your traction control on. So if you're running, at a higher speed, so if you're anywhere from, 30 to 60 miles per hour in four-wheel high, and, the conditions are pretty good, there might be a lot of snow on the ground, but, depending on where you live, depends on what kind of snow you have as well. If it's wet snow and if it's heavy, if it's light powdery snow, this is where kind of knowing your terrain and road conditions are going to be really important, because they are going to be a little different based on what part of the country you live in and what your snow is like, and then also how much snow you have. I know some of you ladies, we were talking on the private group, we're talking about 7 feet of snow. I was like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't even imagine that. But so keep in mind what the road conditions are like as you go out. And if you're in four-wheel high and you're running your little bit higher speed, kind of cruising along, go ahead and keep your traction control on. But if you are on bad condition roads, you're running slower in four-wheel low, then you want to turn your traction control off. If you're stuck in the snow though, so say you do end up sliding or you hit a slick spot, you lose traction so that you are at an absolute standstill, you want to turn your traction control on. to help you transfer the power away from the tire that is stuck into the other tires. That way you're not just spinning, spinning, spinning and digging deeper in the snow. So hopefully that helps you. So the traction control is, I call it the little squiggly button, like I showed you on my JKU. And on some of the Jeeps, it's called the ESP button. So when the traction control is on, which is our normal driving, you're not going to see the light. When you drop into four-wheel low on the newer JKUs, and I'm not sure about the JLs, I'd have to ask somebody that owns one, and I will find out. When you drop it into four low, the traction control just automatically turns off. But you can override that by hitting the button, and it'll turn it back on. So just think, if you're in four-wheel high, go ahead and keep it on. If you drop to four-wheel low, turn it off. But if you do get in a spot where you really are stuck, then you're going to want to go ahead and turn that traction control on, so that it helps with transferring the power from the tires, so you don't end up just digging yourself farther and farther and farther into the snow. So using your shifter and an automatic, and again, this is a really just basic understanding of your Jeep, but I felt like when we start talking about driving in winter weather that this is really important to understand. If you have a manual, you don't have to worry about this, because you can downshift and you can upshift, and you have control basically of how much momentum your vehicle is going to be able to get. You might end up at a higher RPM where it wants to shift, but you can hold it there and it's not going to jump to the next gear, and it's not going to jump in front of you. So if you're in a manual, you do have a lot more control over your RPMs, your speed, and not having to use your brakes in your vehicle. So this is something, and I'm going to show you in my 2017 JKU. I know some of the older Jeeps don't have this feature, but they do have 1 and 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you. This is kind of the basic understanding of using your shifter in an automatic Jeep.
So now that we're talking about, we're in four-wheel drive, and I want to talk about, I call it a slap shifter. But as you can see, I have drive, and then there's plus minus right there. So what that means is I have a manual or an automatic in this, but I can go ahead and shift it over so that I can manually control what gear that I am in. So if I drop it down to drive, okay, so I'm in drive, and I'm in drive. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this shifter, I'm going to pull it towards me, 1 click. So I just put it in first gear manually. So now you can see there's a 1 instead of being in D. So now if I wanted to go ahead and be able to shift up and down, if I shift towards me, or I'm sorry, away from me, it's going to go up. So now I'm in second. And if I shift away from me again, it's going to go up, and it's in third. And then I can upshift and downshift manually so that I can control the RPMs and when the Jeep is shifting and what speed it's going to be at. Now to take it out of this, I'm going to go over to the right all the way through until it goes back to D, which means now I am back in drive.
And so by downshifting to a lower gear, even though you're in an automatic, by downshifting to a lower gear, you can stay at a lower speed so that you're in control of when your Jeep is going to shift. And basically, you are then in control of the speed, so that if you drop down into first gear, in first gear, you might wind out the RPM. So the RPM might go a little bit higher, but your Jeep is only going to go so fast. So you're only going to pick up so much speed in first gear. Now, I'm not saying go to first gear, but what I'm saying is if you downshift, it's going to keep the Jeep at a slower speed. So if you do get to a hill, where there's snow and ice and you're on a hill, coming down a hill, you can drop it down into first to really just kind of slowly go down that hill. or drop it down into second so that you're in control of the speed. And then you're not going to have to use your brakes, because in winter driving, brakes are kind of the kiss of death. You don't ever want to slam on your brakes when you're using your brakes in winter weather. You always want to make sure you've left enough room between you and the other cars that you can slowly slow down so that you're not having to actually really push your brakes to stop. And this is where being able to downshift and use your shifter in your automatic more like a manual to help to control that speed and that forward momentum of your Jeep is going to help, that you're not going to have to use your brakes as much, and that's going to keep you safer. So that way, especially on hills, or even if you're in traffic and you're in snow, we get a lot of ice down here. So like our snow, even though it's snow, it's kind of crunchy, icy snow, just because we have so much moisture in our snow. So when you're driving, you might think you're on snow and you might hit some icy patches. So if you're in traffic where there's a long line of cars, instead of just going to drive, use your shifter just like you would in a manual to help downshift to slow yourself down so that you're not having to go to your brakes. And this is just one way of using your gear shifter in an automatic to kind of mimic more of a manual, but to give you more control. And this is going to help to keep you safer in winter weather and winter driving. So you're in control. And again, not using your brakes is the least amount that you can is going to be really important in snow, especially in ice. In icy conditions, you don't want to use your gas pedal hard and you don't want to use your brake pedal hard. So kind of the key to driving in icy conditions is going to be very soft, slow acceleration with your gas pedal, very soft, slow braking with your gas pedal, and it might even be a little bit of push, let go with your brake. If you are on ice or hit an icy patch, that way you don't end up just sliding, and you can keep a little bit better control of your vehicle. So tonight's focus was an overview of how to use your four-wheel drive and driving in winter conditions. The one thing I did not talk about is lockers. So we're going to go ahead and cover using your lockers in the next training class. I feel like the only time you're going to use your lockers in winter weather is if you're in a really bad situation. So tonight I just wanted to cover kind of your basics, especially the fundamentals of four-wheel drive, of understanding how to use your shifter more like a manual to keep a little bit more control, and then also about your traction control and ESP in your Jeep. So our next class, we're going to jump over and we're going to start talking about using your lockers, and this will not be geared just towards winter driving. This is going to be geared more towards trail riding, and when and how to use your locker. So that's going to be our next training class that's coming up. And we're going to do the same thing like we did in this class, and really just kind of start at the very basic level, really understanding the buttons, how you use them, what they do, or your shifter, depending on the year of your Jeep. And then also going over the different kinds of lockers. We have 3 different ways to use our lockers in all 3 of our Jeeps. All 3 are a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and cover that so that you can see there's different lockers, how to use different lockers, and then when to use them, and when not to use them. And we will talk a little bit about winter, but tonight's class was definitely geared towards the four-wheel drive and the winter weather driving, because I know in the winter we're going to be out in it because we have places to go. We have to get to work and home and get around. So we're kind of put out in that winter weather just a little bit more. So I'm hoping that by really kind of going over the basics and covering everything tonight, that those of you that this might be your first winter with your Jeep, which I'm hoping this will be my first actual winter with my Jeep where I can get some snow to drive her in it, that'll help you a little bit. So the biggest thing is I just want to tell you, thank you for joining me tonight. I know it was a little bit later, but I greatly appreciate you ladies jumping on here and being here. And I know Chad was in the comments with us tonight as well, helping, which is wonderful. he is one of our LadyJeepers.com experts who will jump in and help us anytime we need some extra technical, mechanical driving. He helps with some of the videos, but it's great to have out there and is a wonderful help, and really is excited to see all of us ladies out there doing, and is supportive. So we'll never have anybody on here that's not supportive and that is not excited to be a part of this. So thank you, Chad, for being in the comments and helping tonight. Always appreciate that. And I just want to thank you ladies again for being here. And if you have any questions, when the videos were playing, I was able to kind of jump in and see some of the comments, which was really nice. But I can actually see them now that we're off of the training. So if you have any questions or any extra comments, I'll give you a couple seconds. And I just want to thank you for jumping on here. I always appreciate it. I always have a great time. I love doing these classes and sharing information, and I'm learning too along with you ladies. There's times I'll learn something new too when I'm putting the classes together and be like, oh man, I had never thought of that, or oh, I forgot about that. So this has been wonderful. And I'm so excited to be here and enjoy every minute with you ladies. And I hope this really helped tonight as we're getting started towards our winter weather and getting out there to enjoy our Jeeps and have fun and enjoy being out there, but also feel confident and safe while we're out there doing it as well. So with that, I'm going to say good night, ladies, and thank you for being here again. I so appreciate it. I enjoy every minute of it. And if you think of any questions or anything else comes up for you, just go ahead and always you can post a question in the comments below this video and we'll check it and we'll respond. Or if something comes up down the road, you can always just stick it in the LadyJeepers.com group where we are right now. And we'll always jump in there and help answer some questions. Oh, thank you, Roseanne and Joni and Jacqueline and Shannon. Good night, ladies. I will see you in the members group. Good night.